So we're looking at this idea of miracles, and miracles are some things in the ideology of a Jewish person. We look back and we know that there were miracles that happened before, but in our day-to-day life, quite often we're looking and we're waiting for one, but the miracle that we wish we would see doesn't seem to materialize. So the Rabbi Perad actually discusses the intention and the purpose of miracles. What is the intention? What is the function of a miracle? And therefore, on the back end of that, why is it that they occur less and less as time goes on? And he says something magnificent. He says, technically, in this world, there are two types of knowledge, two types of understanding that people have. One type of understanding is a theoretical understanding. Many people have this kind of theoretical understanding. But then there's another kind of understanding which comes from an experiential understanding or experiential knowledge. So as an example, theoretically, I might know that eating chocolate is going to make me fat. But actually, that knowledge doesn't necessarily penetrate my brain. It doesn't change the outcome of my actions because the knowledge is a theoretical thing. There's some connection between chocolate and getting fat, and that's all I know. I don't know more than that, okay? So that's theoretical knowledge. But then there's something which is experiential knowledge. And that experiential knowledge, it's not just another kind of knowledge. The knowledge that one gets from experience, it's burned into the consciousness to a degree that the space between deed and ramification is almost non-existent. So you're erasing that space that allows you to rationalize, that allows you to push things off, etc., etc. So I'll give you an example. The example he gives. His example is, you sit down with your child and you tell your child, don't touch it, it's hot, don't touch it, it's hot, don't touch it, it's hot. Okay, the kid might pull the hand back. But what is the underlying reason why the child is not touching this hot thing? Because he was told off by his parents. Because he thinks he might get less lollipops if he touches the heater or the oven or the stove or the toaster oven. He thinks he's going to get one less cookie if he touches it. That knowledge is theoretical. My parent keeps telling me again and again and again that if I touch this, it's going to be a big boo-boo. It's going to hurt. But to the greatest of our abilities to describe and to allow the child to discern the power and the danger of this mistake, it pales in comparison to the first time that the child actually touches something hot and screams in pain and pulls their finger and doesn't want to let anybody touch it. Then if you take your child's hand and you try and bring it towards that object, I don't know why you would. You're probably a psychotic parent. But either way, if you did that, you tried, the kid would be pulling with all of his effort, all of his energy. Even if you said to the kid, I'll give you a cookie if you touch the heater, or if you touch the pot, or if you touch the oven. The kid's still not going to do it because the knowledge that A equals B is so clear because it's been driven home by the power of experience. And this is why when you meet parents sometimes that talk about allowing children to make mistakes for themselves, other parents don't understand. Why would I, let me teach them from, the wisdom that I've gathered. Let me teach them from my mistakes. And the answer is, to a certain degree, we can do that. And we want to protect our children from all harm and all damage. And the minute anything that they do, they break something, you want to pay for it. They do something bad in school, you want to defend them, to the ends of the earth. But if you're a good parent in the back of your head, that consequences and ramifications, things that people experience, drive home harder truths than the most eloquent of speeches. So that's the difference between theoretical knowledge or theoretical understanding and experiential understanding. What is the purpose of a miracle? From the time that we're young children, we're encouraged by our parents to cover our eyes and say, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel. Right? Shema is Hashem Elokeinu. God, Hashem our God. Hashem Echad there's only one of Him. There's no other power in the world that can compare. That's what Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad means, right? So you say that every day, even maybe every night, you say it twice a day if you're following the halakha. But the minute a person experiences for the first time the occurrence of a miracle, what is the definition of a miracle? The definition of a miracle, at least in our context and in our syntax, is when there's something that we look at we cannot explain. So there's no physical or natural or medical or scientific reason why that should occur, except for the fact that it's a miraculous occurrence. When we witness God imposing his will where it should not be, imposing his will in a way where we have no other explanation other than that, suddenly my understanding, my knowledge, my connection, my relationship with God, it jumps to a completely different space at a completely different level. So it's important for us to understand that this is the purpose of miracles. The purpose of miracles is to erase doubt and to create a connection between you and God, which is not theoretical, but is actually experiential. I know God. I've seen God. I've touched it. I've tasted the fact that Borei Olam can do what he likes. And the minute I do that, and the minute I know that, it changes the entire game. So that is the purpose of miracles. It's also the same reason why we find such a dearth of miracles today, because given an ability to see miracles on a constant basis, that would create this impossibility to not know God. And the value in a person knowing and accepting and believing in and following God is only there when there's a modicum of doubt. The erasure of doubt that happens with miracles exacts a tremendous toll. It exacts a tremendous price. In fact, on some level, it renders meaningless the acts that we do. With such clear knowledge of God, we're not choosing God. We can't help ourselves. We can't physically touch the pot. Even if we were granted all sorts of rewards, how could we do it? We know so clearly in our minds because we've just seen it. Let me give you an example. I want you to imagine someone who is taken to the palace of the king. And in the palace of the king, this girl is being told, you were selected as the wife of the king, as the queen. Come, you're going to have every luxury, all the power, all the servants, everything that you could possibly desire shall be yours. And then the girl says, well, you know what? Okay, I hear this. Let me see this king. Let me meet him. They're like, oh, you think you think this is optional? Like, if you don't want to marry him, he's going to kill you. You're like, you don't try it out with the king and then go be with someone else. That's not how it works. Now imagine this girl, after finding that out, she comes to the palace. She walks right up to the king and she says, Your Majesty, I love you with all my heart. Immediately the king looks at his servants and he's like, idiots. Did you tell her? Did you tell her about the death thing? Right? The idea that failure to comply will result in such immediate and clear punishment, that connection, that my reticence to move forward with this is going to result in me dying, renders my love impotent and unimportant. So therefore, while miracles have a place in society, they have a place especially in the history of the Jewish people, in the inception of the Jewish people, in the incubation of a nation, that rhymes, right? To continue with these miracles forever would actually create a nation that didn't love its creator at all, that didn't want to do mitzvot, but that was forced to do so. And as the Sepharim so eloquently put it, if God wanted angels, he would have made more of them. What God desires is human beings who have the capacity to choose, whose choice, therefore, because of their doubt, because of the space between their knowledge and the ramification, is there. There's room for doubt. There's room to doubt God. There's room to be unsure in our world. Because of that, the act that one does is an act of great trust and great love, and therefore it's greatly rewarded. Now, the truth is, it had to be, though, that the beginning of this would happen via miracles, because you cannot fall in love with a theory. You have a knowledge of God, which is theoretical. It's very powerful. And you know what? It's highly rewarded if you're able to connect with God on that. Yes. But if I don't believe God is real, if I don't believe God is here, what is my relationship with? Who am I connecting to? So it is imperative in the beginning of time for God to do miracles. And it's fascinating to know which miracles he chose. Now, I want to imagine, let's play a little thought experiment here, okay? I want you to imagine you really want to impress this new nation date that you're going on, right, with the Jewish people. You're going to take them out of Egypt. You're going to blow their minds with 10 amazing tricks, right? Now, if it was me, I kind of don't think I would go with frogs. You know, I don't know about you. You see what I'm saying? Like, frogs are not that impressive. Oh my God, you should have seen it. And all of a sudden there was frogs. And the guy's like, yeah, so? And you're like, no, there was tons of them. You know what Hashem did? Hashem brought lice from the ground. Then everyone was, oh, also, yeah, some of the guys had like a skin irritation, terrible boils, This is the best you have, Hashem? Like, have aliens invade Egypt and like probe them with alien hardware, right? Until they decide to release the Jews. Now I can understand. Create some sort of new, incredible asteroid that kind of rises up from the heavens, hits the earth, picks up again, hits the earth, picks up again. Do something crazy. Like, you're God. You could do anything. And the best that you have is avian flu, foot and mouth disease, dever. And the Alter explains magnificently. He says, of course God could have done something out of a sci-fi movie. Of course God could have done something that was not from this world. But the entire point was to communicate that there was a God that loved them, that was present, that existed in their world. So therefore, how did God make himself known? He used the tools, the language of their world. And suddenly they realized that, you know what, if you're itching like this in your hair and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what happened. You know what happened? God happened. You have a boil on your arm? God happened. There's, reptiles or mice in your house? God happened. To see that, to recognize that, to create not a theoretical God, but a God that was present in the most mundane, tedious, things, suddenly imbued the Jewish people with this idea forever, and they've passed it down generation to generation, whether it's on Seder night or otherwise. And to this day, there is a Jewish people imbued with, brimming with, faith in their God, faith in miracles, faith that is so strong that allows them, when war is called upon them in the aftermath of World War II in 1948, everyone around them is like, yeah, we're going to go to war with you. And they had no experience and they didn't have arms. And they stayed and they fought. Where did that come from? It came from a knowledge, a genetically ingrained knowledge that we are a people that have always defied odds. Now, this idea that miracles existed in a world once, it's not that there aren't any today. That's not really the point. It's not that there's no miracles whatsoever today. In fact, there are many, many miracles today. Fascinating, there was a study done a little while ago asking doctors in the medical profession about whether or not they believed in miracles. And it was an incredibly high statistic. And I keep seeing the statistic posted online of 75% of doctors believe in miracles. But that is absolutely a distortion of the facts. Because if you look at it, which is the most amazing thing, one of my favorite memes is a picture of Abraham Lincoln. And it says on the side, do not believe everything you read on the internet, Abraham Lincoln. Right? Genius. What a beautiful meme. You have to be a critical thinker. You need to think for yourself. Don't believe everything you read. Don't be a conspiracy theorist nutcase. But don't just assume something is the way it is because of the way, a newspaper decided to present it. I don't know if you read a couple days ago, there was a headline of the First Lady of New York City. And one of the more right-wing leaning newspapers put out, Mrs. de Blasio says that dismantling the NYPD would be nirvana, would be utopia, which makes her sound like a person that just thinks that the police should be eradicated, which makes her sound like some sort of crazy person. You read the article, and she says the opposite of that. She says we are not in a place where we cannot have. It would be wonderful if we were in a place If we were in a society where we didn't need policing, but we do need policing, I think you and I agree with that too. Wouldn't it be an amazing world where nobody committed crimes? She was talking about an actual utopian world. Okay, fine. But you see, the paper wanted to paint her out to be a left-wing nutcase, so they ran that headline. Don't believe everything you read. Use your brains. This is the ultimate internet filter. That between both of your ears, your brain. Now, so if I looked at this study, and they keep quoting this paper that said 75%, but then if you look at the paper itself, you know what the paper says? It says they polled 1,100 doctors, and 75% believed in miracles and in God. But then you read closely, it says they polled 1,100 doctors who were all religious. They were Jewish and they were Christian and they were whatever else they were, right? But they were all religious. They weren't checking with doctors that were not religious. So by definition, yes, they'll agree that there is a God. They haven't said which. They believe in miracles because that is a function of their religiosity. Okay, so it's not a fair study to quote the 75% number. But I can tell you that the number is higher than you might think, because most people think that a knowledge of science and a knowledge of medicine automatically minimizes a person's connection with Judaism and religion. And I still remember one conversation that I had with a doctor in England. I went to visit a patient who was on his deathbed. And, they called me to come and do vidui. So I come into the room and I said to the doctor, I said, Doc, they tell me things are getting worse. What's going on? He understood, as a member of the clergy, I have responsibilities. You have to prepare the Chevra Kadisha. You need to let them know if something's coming, etc., etc. So he said to me, he goes, Rabbi, all I can tell you is you should go and pray. I was like, it's funny that the doctor is telling the rabbi, right, to go and pray. I thought that was a little bit strange, right? So I went to him and I said, what do you mean? He says, Rabbi, I'm not a religious man. But go do your prayers, because I've seen time and time again that when the Jewish community prays together, then somehow they can recover when all of my medicine and science says they won't. So he says, Rabbi, go do your prayers. Amazing. This was a man who maintained still that he was not religious. And still said that this is something that he has seen happen time and time again. So if I said earlier that there aren't miracles today, at least in the way that they once were, what is this doctor talking about? And the answer is, there are miracles that occur today all the time. And in fact, if I ask those of you who are on the Zoom or on Instagram or on Facebook, if you could write in of an experience where you realized and saw with your own eyes a miracle occur, type it in. Just give us a short version of the story. I believe that there'll be many, many people, if they're not embarrassed, to say that I've experienced, I've seen something. And I tell you, in my life, I've seen many, many times things that could not possibly be explained in any other way. And it's not because I have an unconscious or subconscious bias to religion. It's because statistically, it doesn't work. It's impossible that the timing should work out, or that the specific recipient should work out, or that the person who was the one who paid for that person's education should wind up having that randomly that guy attends his burial and is the number 10 person at the minyan to say Kaddish at his funeral. I mean, the stories that I have been personally privy to in my own life, I've seen the miracles happen again and again. But why can they happen? They can happen because I have the capacity to deny them. Because a river of water is not turning to blood. Yeah, because, hailstones are not falling from the sky. It's just that a person, in what seems to be a natural progression, all of a sudden comes off a ventilator. And a person who's supposed to have cancer suddenly has a recovery when they don't see that the chemo is working. Okay? Now, in that scenario where a person retains their free will, they're capable of having a miracle, but not having it erase the space between their free will or what they're seeing and the ramifications thereof. So, if this is the case, there's something very interesting that happens, because this is something which is true about all people. And much of this class is about us being able to turn a little bit of a microscope on ourselves, to really understand ourselves well. And I think when people hear those words, see myself under a microscope, they're terrified. I'm not saying that there's anything bad under that microscope. I'm just saying, let's take a look. Sometimes there's something that you need to fix. Sometimes there's something that you can be very proud of and build on. But unless you notice it, you don't have that power, and that knowledge is indeed power. So I want to speak a little bit about how this happens, how we create this cognitive dissonance, this space from what we know, this allowing of something to remain in the realm of the theoretical to the point where it's not burned into my physical memory, to the point where my body rejects it. And I want to express 2 or 3 cases like this. And I don't know, I hope that none of them apply to you, but you'll recognize this in someone else. You have someone who will tell you, my father's passed away, my mother's passed away. I cannot tell you. Every time I went to the funeral, I buried the person. But Rabbi, I'm telling you, I'm sitting here in the house, I keep waiting for them to walk in the door. I'm surprised by the end of the day. Like, I can't believe that I'm not in a dream. It has to be that this did not happen. I have to tell you, I felt that way for a long time about Corona. The world is like, falling apart all around you. And even though you're reading the news reports every day, you understand what's going on. Granted, with some, modicum of confusion. You keep thinking, no, this is not real. The brain will not accept that which it does not want to accept. And we love to think of ourselves as supremely logical, governed by intellect. But nothing could be further from the truth. We often decide what we want to believe before we decide what we believe. And because that is true, so you have people who lose somebody and they still can't believe, and they're in denial of the fact that the person is gone. I saw with my own eyes the person go in the ground. We shoveled the earth on top of them. But I can't accept that they're gone. You see sometimes people who are a little too happy during Shiva. First sign of denial. So healthy when you see people crying. So healthy. Okay? What happens sometimes when a person gets divorced? A wife that raised her children all these years, somehow it doesn't work out, they get divorced. It takes time to sink in that the breadwinner that you were married to is no longer providing for you. So you kind of somehow expect like the bills are gonna be taken care of because that was your arrangement with your ex-husband from before. Or it might be the exact opposite. And somehow, until someone gives you an actual kick in the behind and forces you to get out there and get a job, quite often people, after a divorce, they can't come to terms with something that they know with absolute certainty. You could ask them about it. They will tell you, yes, I am divorced. Where is your income coming from? I don't know. What are you going to do? I'm not sure. What do you mean you're not sure? What are you doing today? What are you going to do tomorrow? Right? The last example you find of this is people who lose their jobs. They're still getting up in the morning. It's fascinating. Like that, as if they have somewhere to go. They're getting up. They know it. But somehow their heart and their head are they're not communicating. Because it's not something I want to believe exists. And not something I want to believe happens. So whereas God being in control is a very comforting thing when you want him to be, God being in control when you don't want him to be is a terrifying thing. When I'm not being the person that I'm supposed to be. When I'm not doing, when I feel like I have no right to ask and he's the only one that can do it. Where there's no one else. Like Yom Kippur, there's no one I could speak to. I have the best lawyer in the world. He can't get me off. Right? So there's a space that happens, a pushing away of knowledge that we have. And I want to talk about this, the power of knowledge when a person allows the knowledge all the way in. They become unshakable. When your understanding of miracles, of God's existence in your life is not theoretical or religious, but it's a reality, you know? What if I don't believe in God? That doesn't stop him from existing. What if you don't believe in your dad? You know what? Your dad's deadbeat. You know, he doesn't turn up, he doesn't help out, he doesn't do anything. I don't believe in him. He doesn't stop existing because you don't believe in him. When things are reality, they are what they are, whether we like it or not. But somehow, the minute we accept that things are that way, suddenly there's an opportunity to be able to work with that information. So I want to talk about this idea, framing from the Alter expresses it through the understanding of the sin of Mei Meriva. You know, Moshe was probably our greatest leader ever. But as the Pasuk says, En tzaddik ba'aretz asher lo yechta, there's not a single tzaddik on earth that never makes a mistake. That he does good and he never makes a mistake. I always loved that extra little bit there. It doesn't just say that there's no one who doesn't make a mistake. Because you know what? It's very possible to not make a mistake if you don't do anything. But there's no one who does good and doesn't make a mistake. Because in order to do good, you have to take chances. Sometimes you have to take risks. Sometimes you have to push yourself and you don't know how it's going to turn out. And you don't know if you're going to be man enough to get the job done, right? So even Moshe makes a mistake, and he makes one mistake, one famous mistake. So let's talk about the mistake very quickly. The people are very thirsty. They come and they're complaining to Moshe. Moshe says to God, the people are complaining for water. Fair complaint, right? They're allowed to complain about water. They don't have water. God says to Moshe, no problem. Here's a rock. Speak to the rock. The rock will release miraculously water. So if you look at the verses themselves, it seems very straightforward. Moshe goes to the rock. Instead of speaking to it, he hits the rock. It doesn't come out. He hits it again. The water comes out, and God is very mad. Why? Ya'an asher lo he'emantem bi l'akdisheni. Because you did not believe in me to sanctify my name. Le'enei b'nei Israel, to the eyes of the Jewish people. You didn't believe in me to sanctify my name by speaking to the rock in front of the eyes of the Jewish people. Lachen lo taviu et hakahal hazeh el ha'aretz asher natati lehem. You will not be the one who will bring the Jewish people across the River Jordan into Eretz Israel. In fact, that's going to be Yehoshua, it's not going to be you. Because of one mistake. Our rabbis tell us that the greatest tzaddikim are judged with the finest, to the finest degree, almost to like the width of a piece of hair. Okay? HaKadosh Baruch Hu medagdek im tzaddikim kechut ha'se'ara. Like a hair. Because on their level, these mistakes are huge. When a janitor makes a mistake, it might not be so important if he used this product, not that product, he forgot to clean this room. But if a CEO makes a tiny mistake, the whole company could go under because of a silly mistake that he made. Because he didn't file this. Or because he didn't see that report. Or because he shut off his phone because he just was too tired and didn't get the phone calls when, things were, when the whole place was, needed a executive decision that would save the company. The greater a person is, the more impact their tiny mistakes have on the world around them. So therefore they are judged very, very, very carefully based on those actions. But the question is twofold. Question number one. God is saying to Moshe, I'm upset at you. What should he have said? Because you hit the rock instead of spoke to it. God doesn't say that. God says, you know what your problem is, Moshe? You know what your problem is? You didn't believe in me. This is Moshe. Moshe doesn't need to believe in Hashem. He talks to him all the time. Hashem literally gave him the Torah. How could Moshe not believe in God? Obviously, Moshe believed in God. So question number one is, it seems like God is saying that the mistake that Moshe made was that his belief, his emunah was not strong. He didn't have emunah. Lo he'emantem bi. Okay? That's question number one. Question number two is, actually, if we take a look at the story, the commentators shed a little bit of light on what was going on here. Our Mefarshim explain that God said to Moshe, speak to this rock. He delineated one specific one. This is the one. You're going to take water out of this rock. Moshe turns to speak to the rock, and the commentators explain that Moshe overheard murmuring from the people. Oh, he's going to take it from the rock now. Really, he knows which rock. You ever had that before? Every guy who's ever at watching a magic show, every armchair magician sits there, and the magician is like, "Oh, I'm going to do this," and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, it's not a real lock. The keys are made out of Play-Doh." And then each thing that you said, that he takes the keys and he hits it on the table, and you hear that it's solid. And he takes the lock and he gives it to people in the crowd, and including you, and you can't open it. So all of a sudden, all your theories, they dissipate. But Moshe was the same. Moshe's like, "Okay, everyone, stand by and see God's hand. I'm going to speak to this rock," and everyone's like, "Oh, this is one of those special rocks. This is a planted rock. He planted it earlier, right?" Moshe is a geologist. He knows how to remove water from rocks. Or maybe there's a stream under that specific rock that's blocking. You just see, removes the rock and each comment that Moshe heard made him realize that there was a paradox, because the people were murmuring, "Let's see him bring the water from another rock." Moshe is left with a paradox, with a conundrum of the highest order. What was God's intent in bringing them water from the stone and not from Poland Springs? What was God's intent? Like Hashem said, "Lahakdisheni." The point was to create a Kiddush Hashem, to sanctify God's name, to have everyone realize God's power and God's influence in the world. But all of a sudden, he's about to do that thing that's supposed to be a Kiddush Hashem, and he starts hearing that if he follows God's word, if he follows God's instruction, where God said to him, "This is what you should do, hit this rock," if he hits this one and follows God's orders, it might actually become a Chilul Hashem, a desecration of God's name. Oh, he can only do it on that rock. There was really water there from it. There was water there before. So he's stuck. Listen to God and have a desecration of God's name, or don't listen to God and have a sanctification of God's name. Because Moshe knows it doesn't make a difference to God which one. Let me just speak to this one instead. Another rock. Okay? Moshe's stuck here. Literally between a rock, not in a hard place, but at another rock. All right? Rabbi humor. Sorry. Are you seeing this? You seeing this problem? Add to the problem pot that the whole point of the exercise was for God's name to be sanctified. And Moshe's looking and seeing that if I listen to him, actually the spirit of the law will be broken. So do I keep the spirit of the law against the letter of the law? Which do I follow? In the end, Moshe decides to listen to the murmuring of the people. And he says to himself, you know what? The people, I hear their doubts, I hear their talking, their rumblings. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to speak to another rock. And what happens? That's not the one Hashem said to speak to. So Hashem doesn't actually do it, because that's not what I said to do. Moshe takes his staff and he hits the rock once. Nothing happens, because again, Hashem, I didn't say that. Moshe hits it a second time, and God sees that as a tzaddik, Moshe's intentions are pure. And Moshe's, his trustworthiness in the eyes of the people is going to be destroyed. So he says to Moshe, you're stubborn about this? Okay, I'll let you have it. But the question is, if this is the conversation that Moshe's having in his head, if this paradox that Moshe's trying to work out, his intentions are actually good, it's all l'shem shamayim, he's trying to bring honor and glory to God. Why is it such a terrible thing that he's done? Why is he denied the ability to bring the Jewish people home to the land of Israel? And now we go back to those first words. Ya'an asher lo he'emantem bi lakdisheni. God says, the problem here is not whether you hit the rock or didn't hit the rock. The problem here is not whether you spoke to it or didn't speak to it. The problem isn't even whether you switched rocks. I told you what to do. Why would you listen to them more than you listen to me? It revealed that there must have been an element, a lack of emunah, of course, on Moshe Rabbeinu's level, in God knowing what he was doing. Hashem's like, do this one. And Moshe's thinking, you know what? I think I better do the other one. What do you mean? Well, because the people, what the people? Hashem, I told you. This idea is unbelievable. And I think, and this is my own chidush, that you actually see the emet of this in the pasuk. Because look at the next words, and they will sing their truth. You didn't believe in me to sanctify my name. Le'eneh b'nei Yisrael. He doesn't just mean in front of the Jews, to the eyes of the Jews. Because he continues and says, Lachen lo taviu, therefore you will not bring, plural, you and Aharon will not bring the people into the land of Israel. What does Aharon have to do with this? And here's where it gets so beautiful. God says to Moshe, I asked you to do something. I told you what to do. I know what I'm doing. Don't you trust? I know what I'm doing. And yes, if I intended my name to be sanctified through this, then it will be, because I said it would. If you chose another way, it means that you were acting le'eneh b'nei Yisrael. You were acting based on what things would look like to them. How does someone else see my actions? What is someone else's opinion going to be about what I've done? And you're not seeing it through your own eyes, with your own clarity, with your own knowledge, with the strength of your moral compass. You're trying to see it through somebody else's version of the facts, without sticking to your own truth. This idea is magnificent because it explains why the pasuk says, Lachen lo taviu. It is for this reason that you and Aaron will not bring the Jewish people to the land of Israel. What did Aaron do? You know what the answer is? Aaron also once made an identical mistake. When they came to Aaron and they said, build us a golden calf because Moshe's not here yet. Aaron knows Moshe's 24 hours off because they made a mistake in their calculations. But he says to himself, you know what? If I don't placate them, maybe they'll kill me just like they killed Hur. And for them to kill a prophet and a Kohen Gadol on the same day, it's going to bring terrible destruction. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put the gold in the fire and I'm going to tell them till tomorrow and I'll waste the time. And by the time tomorrow came, they managed to bring an egel from that fire. Aaron, they're asking you for avodah zarah. What are you doing? Now, Aaron has a great logical interpretation, but it's le'eneh b'nei Yisrael. It was through the eyes of the people he should have been leading, not following. What an unbelievable message. And of course, when we talk about these things, bar minan, we don't come to the toenails of Moshe and Aaron. We can't fathom their greatness. And the ideas that we're explaining here are an oversimplification based on what the Torah is trying to communicate to us and probably isn't the actual truth of what was going on in the case. But the lesson is there. The Torah presents it in that way so that we, in our much more diminished state from them, can still learn something that is relevant to us. What happens when rabbis are led by their communities? When the community wants something and the rabbi just knows, so you know what, you can't beat him, join him. What's the point of having a rabbi that's not going to lead? What is the point? What is the point of being a parent if you're not going to lead? If you're just going to follow what they want to be a popular parent. I'm worried about my relationship with them, so I'm just going to give in. It is possible to allow them to do what they want to do and to still express displeasure. You know, when someone will come to my house on a Friday night and they'll tell me, Rabbi, you know, I drove to your house. What am I going to tell them? Sure, driving is not a problem on Shabbat. Well, that's a very comfortable thing to say. That's being cool about it. But I'm not allowed to say that. I'm not allowed to say that. I have a sacred mission as a rabbi to stay true to Torah law. I have to say things as they really are. But that doesn't mean that I have to say to the person, I don't want you in my house. I can say, well, you're really not supposed to drive, but I'm very glad that you're here. Is this clear? I'm very glad that you're here is not the same thing as me opining whatsoever about this. That didactic nature in the way you choose your words. Some people will say, it's insensitive to not tell the person that it's okay to do that on Shabbat. Go to someone who's not a rabbi for that. Right? Is this clear? Go to someone who's allowed to say that to you if you want that kind of reassuring pat on the back. The reason why I am a rabbi and the reason why you will come to me next time is because I won't tell you, what you want us to do. I won't tell you, what you want to do is okay just because you want to do it. Now, the sensitivity, therefore, in such a case, when the rabbi or leader or parent or guidance or teacher doesn't have the ability to just say yes to the student, to the mentee, to whomever, the sensitivity is in how you communicate your displeasure or the fact that you don't think it's the right thing, but you still think that just because they're doing something wrong doesn't mean that they are an evil person. That's where the sensitivity comes in. Where you can say to someone, well, you know what? It's not the right thing in the halakha. I'm very proud of the fact that you're joining and trying to keep Shabbat and attending a Shabbat meal and build the person up for what they are doing. That is the sensitivity and how it manifests without being a contradiction to truth. So I'd like to kind of move one step further along the Moshe path and one step further as well along our path. When Moshe allowed the people's doubts to cloud his knowledge and his belief, that was the problem. When Aaron did the same, that was the problem. God said, if you're going to come to the land of Eretz Israel, where the Jewish people are graduating already to the next step, right? When they need to rely on you for miracles, they need you for water, they need you for man, they need you for ananei kavod. So ultimately, they'll always listen to you because you have skin in their game. You're able to force your will upon them. But God said, once they get to the land of Israel, what will be? I need someone who's going to fight the people, so to speak, as and when that was necessary. And the Rabbi Perry brings an example. He said there was a young med student who came to him and said, Rabbi, I have a class, a session in the university. It's an incredibly important class. I can't miss it. But the session is on Tisha B'Av. What should I do? So the rabbi said to him, look, if you have to go, you can't miss it, you're allowed to go. So the rabbi said to him, you know what? If you're going to go, he said, the halakha actually is, you're not obligated to sit on the floor in such a scenario. You're actually allowed to sit on a bench. Might be the situation also was after chatzot, whatever, I'm not getting into it. Anyway, the guy went to the class. He sat down on the floor with his unshaved face, with his non-leather sandals, sat down on the floor in his place, and he sat and attended the class. And he came back to the rabbi afterwards. He says, I can't tell you, he says, how good I felt. How good I felt to be in a situation where I was uncomfortable because of the situation. But I was so comfortable with my choice. This is what Tisha B'Av is. This is what I need to do. I also need to do this. So do I crumble and let myself down? I know what I have to do. I know my knowledge is clear for me. And the power often to be able to do great things doesn't necessarily come from our ability to do them on a physical level. It comes from the clarity and conviction that we have that the path we're choosing is the right one. When parents are trying very, very hard with a child, unfortunately, that struggles with drugs or addictions. So a lot of times they'll come and they say, Rabbi, I can't make him do this. I can't force him to do that. I can't, and I always say to them, look, I'm not a drugs expert. It's very, very important. This is not my area of expertise. Like someone said earlier, rabbis deciding whether or not they should open up schools or, do things which are against medical, intervention. Recognizing what you do know and what you don't know, okay? So, the guy came to me and he said, we would advise to do this, but it's very difficult. I'm not sure that this is going to work. Like if he doesn't feel like we're on his team, then this and that. I said to him, Rohi, I feel terrible for you. My heart is with you. I said, but you're not coming to me to speak to me about this. Before you came to speak to me, you already spoke to someone who is a world's expert in this, right? He said, yes. I said, you did a lot of research before you went to this person to speak to him about a pathway you should take with this child who suffers from addiction, correct? He says, absolutely. We paid top dollar. We found the best guy. I said, he told you what to do. So why are you not doing what the guy you paid to tell you what to do told you what to do? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to achieve? I get that you're saying to yourself, maybe it's better if we're on his side, maybe if we're not so tough, maybe. That's a great, theory. But you went to an expert who actually knows what someone like this. He sat with him. He spent the time. He understood the situation. He used all of his powers and all of his knowledge from all of his books and all of his studies and all of his experience. And he's telling you that this is how it works. Borei Olam is exactly the same. And you do not need to feel, and you should not be made to feel, that following what you know to be right from the Torah, from your teachings, from your understandings, that makes you an ancient relic. You need to update your views. We need to be more inclusionary. What does that mean? What does it mean that we need to be more inclusive? Let me give you an example. And this is a fascinating example. In the beginning of the Reform movement, one of the things that they thought that they would need to do in order to get people more interested was they made tiny little changes in laws. And they were very, very minute, very small. And the idea was very simple. What do we need to do? We need to adapt the religion. Otherwise, people are going to leave it. But the fascinating thing is, although that is incredibly popular in the short term, in the long term, it actually fails miserably. And as we know, study after study shows that generations after generations after generations in Reform and Conservative, they're finding a serious decline in their membership. That's what we're seeing. To the point where the chief rabbi, Rabbi Sachs in England, published an entire paper asking, will your grandchildren be Jewish? That was his question that he asked. So what was the answer to that? 5 years, 10 years down the line, when numbers were dwindling and disappearing, what was the answer? The answer was, let's reach out to interfaith couples. So first it was, let's take conversion and make it easier. Then it was, let's take conversion and make it almost laughably easy. Okay? Then after that, where'd it go to? It went to a stage where they said, who cares if they convert? We need people in the benches. So you know what? If there's a couple that one half is Jewish, one half is not, let's welcome them with open arms, double our numbers. Very easy. Is this clear? The obvious thing at the time to them was, follow what the people want. Give them what they want. Let them drive. Let them eat whatever they want. Let them marry whoever. Let them do whatever they want. But ultimately, if you're trying to draw people to a religion, to a doctrine, to a tradition, to a faith, what is the faith worth if it bends itself to the whims of every Tom, Dick, and Harry that comes along and decides to poke at it with what they want in that moment? We Jews have taught the world many, many, many things throughout our long and illustrious career in this world. We've taught about the value of human life. We've taught about the value of education. We've taught about the value of charity. Many, many things that came to the world through our teachings, to the entire world. They make up the fabric of today's moral society across all nations to a large degree. We taught them all of those things. Do you think we should be learning from other people what to be and how to think and what we should accept and what we should include and what we should exclude? Today it's remarkable how quickly people are turning on the most obvious ideas. Think what you're saying. Want to get rid of an entire police department? Now, maybe she didn't say it, but there are others that are. In a city where there is lots of crime going on at the moment. What are you thinking? Now, it's very popular to jump on a bandwagon and to, raise a fist and to whatever. But be a mensch. Think a little bit. Agree with what is agreeable and be man enough to be able to say, and I disagree on this point. Because if you don't have your truth, if you can't stick to who you are, you don't even exist. We exist as human beings to be able to fight for what we think is emet. If we have that, if we do not have that, we have nothing. Don't ever let someone bully you in the name of any sort of political correctness to shy away. Listen, learn, educate yourself, and maybe sometimes, if it's right, change your opinion. But not to be bullied to do so. Not to post something just because everyone else is posting something. Who says what they're posting is good or right or correct or beneficial to the world? Now, in the yeshiva in Nevardik, they worked very hard at this. And I found this to be a fascinating exercise. He would tell his students, I want you to walk into the bakery and ask them where they can find the nails. Like, which aisle is the nails in? What would happen? The students would walk in, very serious, ask the baker, where can I find the nails? The guy's like, the nails? You're in a bakery. What are you talking about? And everyone online would laugh at them. And the Nevardik student would smile and walk out, because that was the point. The point was, in a harmless exercise, he taught them to be able to withstand the ridicule of their peers. How many amazing ideas throughout time were ridiculed, which actually turned out to be emet? For the vast majority of the scientific experiment, when people were learning more and more and more about science, for the vast majority of time, religion was considered to be insane and infantile for believing that there was a beginning to time. The scientific community believed that the universe always existed. There was no beginning. There was no Genesis. However it came to be. It was shocking. It was shocking to the scientific community, number one, when it was posited in scientific journals, and number two, when it was then proven. It's one of my all-time favorite lines, and it taught me one of the greatest lessons. In Time magazine, Albert Einstein was quoted, and he said, not believing or denying an expanding universe has been the single greatest blunder of my scientific career. Albert Einstein. Not a lot of people smarter than that guy, right? Pretty smart dude. What was his biggest blunder? He'd made all his mathematical calculations based on a static universe, a universe that wasn't expanding, a universe that would stay the same because it was always the same. And then all of a sudden, in the 60s, the Hubble telescope was able to notice that planets were moving away from each other. And if they were moving away from each other, that meant that there was a force acting upon them to push them further away. And one could extrapolate backwards that there was a time when they all pushed out from there. Suddenly they realized that an expanding universe indicated that there was a moment when the world was created. Let's say they thought it was the Big Bang. It's not really relevant. That's not the point over here. The point was that they didn't think there was a beginning. To the point that it so bothered them that all the papers that they had written and all their assumptions in science were incorrect, and that this crazy thing called religion got it right, that they immediately shifted from a static universe, which had been in vogue since the Greeks. They expanded it to, they moved it to what was called an oscillating universe, where yes, maybe the world was once here and then it blew out, but maybe it's like a fan. It blew out, but then afterwards it kind of implodes and explodes and implodes and explodes. And that way we could stick with some version of our static universe, a universe that sticks around forever. Because if there's a universe that sticks around forever, you don't have to have God in it. And if there's a universe that comes to be by itself from nowhere, a beginning postulates a beginner. someone that made that happen. And that is a terrifying thought. We often decide what we want to believe before we decide what we believe. And being able to say and to state and to stick to your guns while people might laugh at you was something that the students of Novardik had learned in a bakery. It's hard to stand up for what's right. It's hard. But part of that is because the knowledge that we have has not really and truly been ingrained. I'll give you an example. Let's say someone says to you, take this knife, slice your hand off. You tell him, are you crazy? The guy says, no, it's fine. I'm telling you, it's a myth, that was propagated by rabbis and priests and imams, that if you slice your hand off, then it will slice. It's not true. And you're like, this guy's crazy. And then all of a sudden, he's like, no, let me show you. Look, and he shows you an article on CNN. Yeah? Hand slicing myth exposed, right? And then he goes, I'm telling you, look, social media, Facebook, Instagram. You're not slicing your hand off. Because the knowledge of what happens when you slice, when you cut, it's ingrained knowledge. It's experienced knowledge, because I have cut my hand just a little bit. I have. And I know how it feels. I'm not doing that. If I brought you 100 people that said it to you, if I brought you 1,000 people that said it to you, you're not going to listen. You're all crazy, or you're in on this. And there's some giant camera like the Truman Show, that they're all going to mock me afterwards. Is this clear to everybody? What we're lacking, therefore, is ingrained knowledge. Our rabbis tell us that during the time of Nebuchadnezzar, there were 3 great leaders. And their names were Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Everyone on Instagram, we're just going to pause the shiur and we're going to start again, okay? Or end the shiur to be more accurate. And video. This is how you know, by the way, that these shiurim, that Instagram was not created for Torah, because they don't let you go for an hour when a shiur is always supposed to be an hour. Okay. So we're just going to get it started up one more time. So there's 3 tzaddikim. One of them is called Hananiah, one of them is called Mishael, and one of them is called Azariah. Nebuchadnezzar decides that these guys, they must die. So he builds an incredible furnace of fire. And in his wild, decision to kill all of these tzaddikim, this furnace of fire is heated to such a degree, to such a heat, that there's no way anyone can survive it. And in fact, he gets guards to stand up and to move these tzaddikim and throw them in. And ironically, the guards that are trying to throw Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah into the furnace, they are burned by the fire. Just from the proximity. It is so hot, they die from their burns. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, the Nach tells us, that they survived this fire. And what our Chachamim explained to us is something magnificent. And I often hold on to this, because a lot of times we are disappointed because we believe in miracles and then they don't occur. So I think this magnificent understanding. The 3 tzaddikim survived because they knew unequivocally that they could. That Borei Olam, God in heaven, could save them if he desired. They didn't know if God would make the miracle. They didn't know if they would merit it. They didn't know if it was in his plan, but they knew that he could. A person can be absolutely sure of could, even when they are unsure of would. Okay? These are the miracles that we experience today. And I'll share with you one example of a miracle like this. I took a group from JFS, from a school in England, not such a religious school, Jewish free school, and we went to Poland. And one of the places we go to in Poland is the kever, the gravesite of the Noam Elimelech, a person who was a great lover of all Jews. He was someone who felt the pain and the suffering and the loneliness of every Jew he ever came across, okay? His place, his tombstone, is a place where people flock to on a yearly basis. They go and they pray to God in that place, not to him, but to God in that place, in his merit, They feel a connection to him, and he as well connects with his great love to the Jewish people and becomes, as if you will, a lawyer on high for their deepest and most ardently held needs and desires. So we're in this room. I'm sitting there with 40 kids, almost none of which are religious. It's not a religious school. So I said to them, this is a place, and I can't explain to you why it works. All I can tell you is that I have experienced that it works. People who needed Yeshua, they needed salvation, they needed something in their life, and we prayed here and we experienced almost immediate results when the group prayed for someone. And I said, look, you can pray for yourself if you have something going on in your life, but if you're cynical and you don't believe in it and you don't want, you don't kind of feel like you need to do that, I said, do me a favor. In this room today, we have a teacher with us whose father is actually going into surgery this morning or this evening. He's waiting in the hospital to go in. Please, even if you don't believe, just if you wouldn't mind, pray for this person. You have nothing to lose. Anyway, the group was really touched. This teacher is off on the side, very emotional. Her emotion and her pain, it touched the souls of everyone in the room, including those that maybe were a little bit skeptical. We prayed and we sang and people were crying. It was very, very emotional. Anyway, we shepherd everybody out and they all go out to the bus. And myself and this teacher are the only ones left. And she's standing by the door and she almost falls down. There's like a little set of stairs right outside the door. She nearly falls down the stairs. I said, what's the matter? And I can see that her hands are shaking, okay? And she can barely speak. And she says to me, Rabbi, I need to show you something. Before we had even left the room, before we had left the kever of the Noam Elimelech, she got a text message from the hospital where her father was. And the text message read, we cannot understand why, but the doctors have just told us that there's no need for the surgery. They don't understand what happened to the growth, but it is clear to them that everything is fine and he doesn't even need the surgery. So this dangerous surgery that we were praying for, right? This difficult problem, the results were instantaneous. Like we hadn't even left the room and all of a sudden the phone's buzzing. You understand? When you experience things like this and you see what's going on, it's not that I know that God will do something for me. Maybe I don't deserve it. Maybe that's not the plan. Maybe this person's time is up. But I have seen time and time again that God can. And that knowledge can be ingrained to such a state that a person can understand what they know and know what they know and know what is right and what is correct for them and be immovable and be unshakable because the knowledge is in them. It's not here, it's here. I want to share one last story, if you will. The Rabbi Per, he relates an unbelievable story. It's so moving in its simplicity. When he was 10 years old, he was studying with his father. And this rabbi who would ultimately become a tremendous Rav, a leader of men, right? He's sitting with his father, and as he's sitting with his father, the father's learning with him a Mishnah, one of the Mishnayot in Baba Metzia. And the Mishnah says as follows. If a father who's a Kohen says to his son, I want you to go into the Beit HaKvarot, to the cemetery, and go get me my lost frisbee or whatever. A Kohen is not allowed to go into a cemetery because he's not allowed to become Tameh. So here's a kid, he's being told to do something, he's over bar mitzvah, but his dad is telling him, go into the cemetery. So he has a mitzvah to listen to his father, but he has a mitzvah not to become impure, not to walk into a cemetery as a Kohen. Says the Gemara, the halacha says he shouldn't go in. Halacha says he shouldn't go in. Interesting. So he says, okay. But then his father leans down and looks him deep in the eyes. And he says to him, Yechiel, I want you to always remember. If I ever tell you something, if I ever tell you to do something that you think is wrong, you shouldn't listen to me. The kid, 10 years old, he's hearing this from his father, shocked. And he remembers that till this very day. And I'm just reading this and I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, what a lesson. What a lesson his father's teaching him. Number one, he's teaching him humility and fallibility. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I got something wrong. It is possible that your father got something wrong. Fallibility, humility. A father that's never wrong, he thinks that he can't be wrong in the eyes of his wife, of his child. What he does not realize is if you are never wrong, then you are never right. Because since you can't be wrong, so how do I ever know if you're wrong? It's only once you tell me that I might make a mistake that I can know that you're not making one. Because if you were, you would tell me. You would admit it. You would entertain it. This is what the rabbi told his son. And this is what the rabbi teaches all of his students. Think about that for a minute. Taste that. This education that he was being given by his dad. To think for himself. To be someone who, even a figure of authority, to think, is this right? Does this go against what I think, what I've learned, what I know? And the rabbi said, and these words are so beautiful. The rabbi said, I learned from there that when I know what the right thing to do is, there's nothing in the world that can shake me from it. And he explained that there are impossible situations that have come across his way that he's been able to use that line from his father to be able to navigate. What does that mean? There was a phone call that came to him from a couple. And the couple said, our son married this girl. She's a disaster. She's the worst. Our daughter-in-law, we don't know what to do. All sorts of problems. And on and on and on, they're complaining about what a terrible person their daughter-in-law is. The rabbi sits, he's listening, he hears everything that she's saying. Okay, all right, I hear what the couple is saying. What do you want me to do? You're just calling me to vent. Okay, he listens. A little while later, maybe 2 days later, the rabbi of this couple calls and says, I know this couple, they're such an amazing couple, they're so wonderful, their daughter-in-law is only giving them tsuris, only difficulties, only problems, and now you don't even know what's happened. You know what's happened? Impossible situation. The parents have called their son and told him he has to come home for Thanksgiving. The daughter-in-law doesn't want to come. So the parents are saying, choose us or her. Choose us or her. I'm sure the husband came home and told that to his wife. And what do you think his wife said? Choose them or me. Right? The only thing that ultimatums get is other ultimatums. So he doesn't know what to do. What's he supposed to say to this rabbi who's calling about the situation? He says, you know what, let me speak to them. He calls up the young man on the phone and he says to him, Mechila, I need to talk to you. Okay, what do you need to say? He says, I need to ask you a simple question. You're wondering whether or not you should listen to your parents and go for Thanksgiving, and your wife is going to stay here. You're wondering if you should leave your wife and go back to your parents. He says, you have a mitzvah of kibud avayim, correct? Yes. He says, yes. He says, but open up the halakha. The halakha says, if someone's parents tell him that they forbid him from marrying this girl, does he have to listen to his parents as with regards to who he's going to marry? What's the halakha? The halakha actually says that a person is not obligated to listen to their parents with regards to who they marry. They don't have that obligation. So he said, if that's the case if you don't have to listen to them about getting married, you also don't have to listen to them about staying married. This is going to destroy your relationship. You, in this scenario, have to choose your wife first. Because wife always trumps parents. The guy says, okay. And then the rabbi says, before you go, he says, would you mind sending me your wife's number? And he calls the wife. And he says, look, I understand it's a very difficult situation. On the one hand, he has to honor his parents. On the other hand, he wants to honor you. He's being torn apart. Yeah, but shouldn't he do things for me? And shouldn't he? And the rabbi says, absolutely. He says, and I told him that. But I just want to tell you that while he has a halacha to put you first, you also have a halacha to put him first. The rabbi said, showing the people, number one, that they did not have that obligation to go. And showing the husband that he had to back his wife. And then showing the wife that even though if he had to choose between them, he's going to choose you. And he's agreed. But you also have a responsibility here. Do you want your husband to lose his parents over you? Figure out how to make it work. Once they took it away from the choice between this, and it became a question of how does one behave, all he needed to do, the rabbi said, was, I remembered the lesson from my dad, is go back to the halacha to see what is considered the right thing to do. And suddenly, the right thing sheds light in a place where it doesn't seem like there's any answer. And the words that he quotes from the Alter are unbelievable. The Alter says, Kishem shelo yotze choshech me'or. Just as darkness does not come from light, nature dictates that darkness cannot come from light. Ken lo yitachen. So too it is impossible sheyetze mitzivui Hashem chilul Hashem, that it should come from a commandment of God, chilul Hashem. Impossible. If there's a chilul Hashem, it's because you allowed your own ego to get involved. And you came in and you made yourself bigger than everybody else. It wasn't because you did the right thing. Because from the right thing can't come the wrong thing. In the same way that darkness cannot come from light. Moshe's mistake was this. Hashem said, do this. It cannot be that the wrong thing would come from listening to Hashem's command. So oftentimes, in impossible situations, the only thing a person needs to ask and to figure out is, what does the Torah tell me to do? What has God instructed me to do? Because built into that instruction is a way of peace. Built into that instruction is a way of light. And I thought to myself, perhaps that's what the pasuk means when it says, Bidvar Amonai, in the word of God, Shamayim Na'asu, the heavens were made. Literally, it means that God said, let there be heavens, let there be earth, and there was. But perhaps a deeper understanding, according to what we've learned today, is Bidvar Amonai, if you're following the word of God, Shamayim Na'asu, heaven can be made. Heaven can be made in a home. Heaven can be made between people. Heaven can be made amongst Am Yisrael. And heaven, which our rabbis teach us, is an amalgam. Shamayim is an amalgam of esh and mayim, of fire and water. Two things which are opposite to one another. Shem, esh and mayim. But when God said it must be so, then it does. It acts in that way. When God says barad must fall, ice and fire combine. And that's what we mean when we say in the Kaddish, Oseh shalom b'meromav. God makes peace in his heavens, where there's fire and water, where opposite things need to work together. And suddenly, because God said it will be so, it is. That is the power of bringing into our collective consciousness this idea, the absolute commitment to getting things right. Because when we have that commitment, and when we don't back down, and we don't water things down, and we don't pander, and we don't succumb to some sort of political correctness, etc., 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 the power of that emet is capable enough to bring unbelievable yeshuot, salvation, unbelievable beracha, unbelievable shalom, even to intractable machloket. May God bless us all with the blessings of the Torah. Thank you so much for joining us each week. Thank you as well to everyone who mentioned, who brought some beautiful stories. I have to read them quietly because I see that a few of them are private, of amazing nisim and miracles that have happened to them. It's very, very special. Thank you so much. I'm going to read them as soon as I log off. Thank you so much, Instagram, and thank you as well for coming back after our commercial break. You never know if someone's going to make it all the way back. Hazaku Baruch. See you later, everyone. Bye.